So I read them all on audio. If you haven't heard of that, I don't know where you've been. So it's not like a book, kind of been a little obsessed with it lately. Like that was my entire brain. Fangirl quotes and Bayside lyrics. Hi everyone, my name's Ebony. Welcome back to my channel. So I, yet again, unintentionally took a break from BookTube. Mostly because I haven't been in the best mental space lately. So I haven't been feeling very productive. I haven't been reading a lot. I haven't been being any sort of productive at all really lately. But I'm working my best to get back into a more productive headspace. I have a lot planned to do today and I've got a good amount of my to-do list done. So hopefully the momentum continues throughout today and I will be able to film a bunch and hopefully start editing some stuff and get stuff set and ready to go. Cross your fingers. This is only the first video I have to film today. So just jumping right in, today we're going to be talking about the books I read both in February and in March because I didn't do a February wrap up because like I said, haven't been very productive lately. But it's okay because in March I read very few books, so it kind of balances out, hopefully. But before we get into that, I'm going to start with the Oracle deck. And so I started this a month ago now or so. It's just been a long time since I've done a video. But basically I bought this Oracle deck from the bookstore that I work at, and it's by Amanda Lovelace, who is a poet that I really enjoy reading her work. And so I decided that I would do a reading of sorts for every video until we get through all of the cards. So I'm taking out the cards that I've already shown. One's because it's just fun, and the other reason is because then we can see all of the art for all of the things and take time to appreciate all of the art. So here are the backs of the cards, and I'm just gonna shuffle them and then grab one randomly. Got them all shuffled, and I'm gonna grab this one. Universe, we're all just stardust. When we're children, we can barely comprehend the vastness of our own lives, let alone the existence of other planets. It's not long before we learn we aren't the center of the universe. We are but specks of stardust in one of its many skies. However, we must all still do our part to take care of our own individual worlds, or else it throws everything else off balance. Make sure to keep balance in your life, but don't forget the big picture stuff. Recycle, don't litter, and give thanks. So that's a fun reading. I like the piece that it said about having balance in your life. I think I've been struggling with that a little bit lately, so. And then also, of course, just being sustainable, giving back to our planet. Love that. Okay, so there's your Oracle reading for today. I hope you all got something meaningful out of it. And now we're gonna jump into my bullet journal pages for this month. So in the January wrap-up that I didn't have my stats page completed yet for my bullet journal, but I do have it done now. So here's my stats page, and I will just go ahead and read you all the stats. And I'm also going to read January's just because I wasn't able to do it for the January wrap-up. So in January I read 12 books, 3,260 pages, 3 physical books, 9 audiobooks, 2 rereads, and I added a new category, which is my average star rating for the month. So 3.64 stars was my average. In February, I read 15 books, 4,349 pages, 4 physical books, 11 audiobooks, 2 rereads, and 3.92 star rating. So that's a really good reading month. In March, I read 7 books, 1,702 pages, 0 physical books, 7 audiobooks. So I read them all on audio. 1 reread, and a 3.75 star rating. And now I'm gonna jump into my wrap-up pages that are in my bullet journal and give you a little sneak peek of the books that I'm gonna talk about today. So this is my February wrap-up page. Woo. This is my March wrap-up page. With that all aside, we're just gonna jump on in to the books that I read. So the first book I read in February was Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Rice, who is an Anishinaabe author. This book is kind of like a dystopian, sort of apocalyptic indigenous fiction, and I actually decided to pick this up because Stephanie from Stephanie Bookish really liked this book, and I wanted to give it a try and see what I would think. Basically, it follows this indigenous community of people, and one day their power goes out, so they don't have any electricity or phones or anything like that, but none of them take it super seriously at first because I guess that's a common occurrence in the community that they live in. But after a while, people do start to panic, and the community has to sort of band together to get themselves through the winter that is coming. I really enjoyed the tension in this book. It was really a slow burn kind of thrillery sort of story. I just loved that atmosphere and that tension. I wasn't super invested in the audiobook that I was listening to, and it might just be because I listened to it on audio, and if I had like read it physically I would have liked it better. But overall I still thought it was a decent read, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. I do kind of wish I had read it physically so I could have like invested myself some more in it, so maybe one day I will decide to pick it up physically. Then I read Empty Bottles Full of Stars by Robert M. Drake in R.H. Scene. This is a poetry collection that I read while I was at work. Sometimes when I'm at work, if I want to read something like during my lunch break, I'll grab a poetry collection and read that while I'm eating, because I can read those in, you know, like half an hour or so, which is how much time I get for lunch. I just decided to pick this up one day because I thought the cover was really pretty. I don't give poetry books star ratings because I don't feel that it's fair to like rate a poetry collection, especially if I don't have like the time to give it to like analyze all of the poems and like really like come to my own conclusions about each poem, because poetry is such a like beautiful genre and you do have to take each poem on its own terms and like really like sit there and analyze it, which I do know how to do. Like I've done it in my poetry classes and stuff, but just like when I'm reading on my 30-minute lunch break, I just don't have time for that. Generally I don't give poetry books star ratings. I love a good poetry collection. Then I read The Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. This copy is actually an arc that I've had for a very long time. I think it came out in October of last year, but I never like got around to it until recently. This follows 2 main characters who are witches, and like the witchy like magic in this book is really like cottagecore kind of vibe. Like it's really like chill, just like cool witch magic. I don't know if I'm describing that right, but like I really liked the aesthetic of the witches in this story. And basically the main character, this guy like broke up with her, and her friend were like really mad at him, so they put a curse on him. It's not really like an actual curse, like they weren't using like the right stuff for the ritual or anything like that. They were kind of just like blowing off some steam and like having a fun time to help her get through this breakup. But it turns out the hex actually went on the ex-boyfriend. It sort of jumps forward in time when the ex-boyfriend and the main character come into each other's lives again, and it's like a second chance romance kind of thing. It was super cute. Before this, I feel like I didn't read a lot of adult romance, but this one like really hit for adult romance, and it kind of got me into that genre a bit more, and you'll kind of see that reflected later in this video. I really liked it. I thought it was super cute and very fun. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Ain't Burn All the Bright by Jason Reynolds and Jason Griffin. I read this as an ALC, or an advanced listening copy. Like basically it's like an arc but on audio that I get through the bookstore that I work at through Libro, which like shameless indie bookstore promo. Libro is basically works the same way as Audible, except instead of supporting Amazon, it supports indie bookstores. So definitely if you use Audible and you enjoy it, I would recommend checking out Libro just to help support your indie bookstores. But anyway, tangent aside, I did get this one as an audiobook, which it's basically like a poetry collection of sorts, but it also has a lot of art interspersed throughout the book. And unfortunately, since I read it on audio, I wasn't able to see the art. So I definitely want to read it again physically so I can look at all the art, because it's mostly art, I think. Like there isn't a super lot of text. I'm pretty sure the audiobook was like not even an hour long on normal time, but I did really enjoy it. There was a lot of like oxygen, like symbolism and imagery throughout the piece, and I thought that that was a really interesting like metaphorical way to take it. Jason Reynolds always writes really poignant books. He is the author of Long Way Down, which is a book that I have read, both the book itself and also the graphic novel, and they're both very, very good. So I really love Jason Reynolds' work, and I do want to read more of him in the future. This book specifically, I didn't give a rating because again, it is kind of poetry in a way, and I wasn't also able to see the art, so yeah, it wasn't fair to give it like a full rating, but I did really enjoy it. Then I read Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood. So Ali Hazelwood is the author of The Love Hypothesis, which if you haven't heard of that, I don't know where you've been, because it's literally everywhere. So many people are talking about it, especially on Book Talk. So Ali Hazelwood has this like mini-series kind of thing called the STEMinism, like adult romance books. Basically they follow women in STEM and their adult romance, and they're super amazing. There's 3 of them, and I have actually read all 3 now, but we'll get to that. They are technically like companions because the main character in each of them is like friends with the other main characters. So they are kind of like referenced in each book, but you don't have to necessarily like read them in a specific order or even read all of them total. But they are all novellas, so they're very, very short, which I loved. I do love a good short book. Also, I don't think that they're available in print. I've tried to like see if I could get them through the bookstore that I work at, because like all of the covers of them are really super cute, and I'm sure because they're novellas they'd be like really skinny, so I feel like it would be really cute to have like all 3 of them like as a collection like on my shelf. I wanted it so badly because I really enjoyed all 3 of these, and I could not get them through Ingram, which is our distributor, unfortunately, so I don't think that they're available in print, at least not as of right now. Maybe someday she'll do like a bind up of some sort, which would be cool. I think you can only read them on ebook, or as I read them on audiobook. So this one, Under One Roof, follows the main character Mara, who gets willed this house by like one of her professors, and she doesn't know, like she goes to move into this house and she doesn't know that the professor's, I think it's her grandson or maybe nephew, is already living there. And so she's like, well, I have nowhere else to go, so she basically also lives there, and it's kind of like an enemies to lovers, like roommate share the same space kind of situation, and it's so adorable. I loved the romance in this book. The main character is also a woman in STEM, which like all of her characters are women in STEM, which I feel like is really great representation. I really enjoyed this, and it was so short, so it was like so easy to get through, and it was great. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Organizing for the Rest of Us by Dana K. White. This is actually like a nonfiction book, sort of like a self-help kind of thing about how to stay organized and keep your space organized and decluttered and all of that jazz. I picked it up also as an ALC, and I didn't really know what to expect from it. I was just it was short, and I was kind of in that mood for like cleaning and getting things organized, so I was listening to it while I was like cleaning my dorm. So I gave it 4 stars. I didn't really know if I should rate it because it was like nonfiction self-help kind of thing, but I did still find it entertaining, and also like kind of like teaches you a little bit about how to keep your space clean and organized and decluttered. So yeah, really good. And then I read How to Be a Moonflower by Katie Daisy. This is a book that I got from the bookstore. We had a damaged copy of it, and I thought it was so beautiful. It's actually kind of like a coffee table book, so it's not like a book of sorts. It has some writing in it, but it's mostly like imagery and beautiful pictures, and it just like talks about like flowers that bloom at night and like how to take night walks and just enjoy like nature at night. I don't know. It was very beautiful, super cute, and obviously a very quick read because it's not really like a book really. I think this is a nice like really pretty one to have like on your coffee table, or just like a nice book to display because the art in it is absolutely stunning. And I also gave this one 4 stars. Again, I wasn't sure if I should rate it or not, but I decided I would go ahead and give it a rating because it was just so beautiful. Fun fact, the last 4 books that I've talked about, Ain't Burn All the Bright, Under One Roof, Organizing for the Rest of Us, and How to Be a Moonflower, I read all of those in one day. To be fair, they were all very short ones, but it was a very productive day. Then I read The Collective by Allison Galen. So this is a thriller book that I've had the ARC for a long time, but I finally picked it up, and it follows a mother who is grieving the loss of her child. Her daughter was killed under very unfortunate circumstances, and the man that they think is responsible for it was never really like brought to justice for that, and so the mother is like having a really hard time and is going through this grieving process, and she ends up getting an email that takes her to a like dark web like internet forum chat of other mothers who are also going through the same sort of thing, where like their children were killed and the people that were like responsible were never like charged for their murder. So she kind of gets sucked into this community, and at first it's kind of just like they're venting about, you know, like the loss of their child, about wanting to take their justice into their own hands, that kind of thing, and they're all kind of just supporting each other. But it goes very serious very quickly, and it turns out that this group of women called The Collective, who are serious about this, sort of work together to bring that justice about. So she gets sucked into this like mastermind grand scheme. She gets like all these directions from, you know, like a burner phone, like a text on a burner phone, and so she has to like go somewhere, buy like a certain thing, and then mail it somewhere else, and that's it. And then she finds out later that that thing was used in the murder of someone else, who is like essentially the killer of another mother's child. So like this whole collective of women kind of like work together under the leadership of one specific person who kind of started all this to bring the justice about, and do it in a way that like they won't get caught because they're all like supposedly not related except for on this dark web forum chat. So this book was wild. It was a super crazy thriller. I was so invested like the whole time. I think the dark web is really interesting and something that you can do a lot of really cool things with. And so like that already is kind of like spooky, and then, you know, you bring in all these like essentially murders. I really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend. I hand sell this book at the store all the time. Like if someone comes in and they want a thriller that's like a page turner, I'm like, this one, get this one. It's so freaking good. I almost gave it 5 stars, but I didn't, because mostly when I read a 5-star book, I kind of like know in my gut that it's like a 5-star book. And this one I didn't quite have that feeling for. I did really still enjoy it. It just didn't quite like hit that 5-star mark. If I did 0.5s or like 0.75s, I would probably give it like a 4.5 or a 4.75, but I don't, so I just gave it a 4 stars. But still so good. I highly recommend if you're looking for a thriller, like a spooky book that's gonna like keep you on the edge of your seat. Then I read If the Fates Allow by Rainbow Rowell. So this is a like companion novella to Fangirl, which if you don't know, Fangirl is one of my favorite books of all time. I would say it's probably my second favorite book of all time. I've kind of been a little obsessed with it lately, but we'll get there. But anyway, so If the Fates Allow is a companion that follows Kath, the main character Fangirl. It follows her roommate Reagan, and Reagan goes home for Christmas, and it's also set during like 2020, I believe, so like during like peak pandemic, so there's also some of that like pandemic conversation going on as well. It was a novella, so it was still fairly short, but I did love returning to some of my favorite characters and just like seeing more from them. Unfortunately, it is only available I think on audiobook and ebook, and I had to get it through Audible. I think it's like an Audible exclusive, so I had to get it through there, and it made me very, very sad, but I wanted to read it so badly. Rainbow Rowell is absolutely one of my favorite authors of all time. I've actually met her a couple of times now, because she's from Omaha, which is where I live, and, you know, she does a lot of events through the bookstore that I work at, which is so, so cool. I love her books, and I really enjoyed this one too. And I also gave this one 4 stars. Then I read The Light Through the Leaves by Glendy Vanderrohe. This book I read physically, and Glendy Vanderrohe is the author of Where the Forest Meets the Stars, which was my second favorite book that I read last year. And so I was really excited to read her. This is her second book. And also she has another book. It actually came out a couple weeks ago, and I pre-ordered my copy from the bookstore, and it's supposed to come in any day now, so I'm very excited to get that one and to read it. This is her second book. It follows a mother named Ellis who has 2 boys, and she also has a baby daughter named Viola. And unfortunately, one day Ellis is kind of going through a lot of stuff, and she accidentally leaves her child in the parking lot of like a park woodsy kind of area, and doesn't realize until, you know, she's several miles down the road that she left her baby in that parking lot, and by the time she gets back there, her baby's gone. So someone has kidnapped her child, and that causes like a string of events and like her to spiral at times. So she ends up leaving her family, just going to be on her own and like figuring out her life and all of that. So it follows that, but it also follows a little girl named Raven, who I believe at the beginning of the book she starts out at 7, and it kind of like follows her through her like teenage years. And Raven and her mother have like different beliefs. Her mother is very like spiritual and like grounded into nature and the earth, and she raises Raven that way. And so Raven believes that she was born from like the earth spirits, and she believes that they have like magical sort of earth powers in a way. And she is homeschooled for the first part of the book, and it's just her mother and her are just very like reclusive and like excluded from the community. So it kind of follows Raven as she grows up, and then also Ellis throughout many, many years, and how their lives merge together. This, I thought it was so well done. Glendy Vanderrohe, if you don't know, she's an ornithologist, I believe is what it's called. Basically she studies, she's an avian biologist. Maybe ornithologist is not the right word. Whatever. Basically she studies birds, and so I can definitely see the relation between this book and Where the Forest Meets the Stars. That one also was very like nature set and followed an older woman and a younger child. So I can definitely see like the correlation between the 2 books. They're not related in any way, like they're separate standalone novels, but I can see like where her like niche kind of sets in. I love this book, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Over My Dead Body by Sweeney Boo. This was a graphic novel about witches, and they sort of go to like a witch school. The like conflict comes in there's sort of like this folklore of this like nature beast kind of thing, and one of the students at the school goes missing, and so they have to like try to find her. It's a graphic novel, and I read it as an arc. I believe it comes out, it might not come out till like August or September or something like that. But because I read it as an arc, not all of the art of the graphic novel was completed, and I did take a little video of it because I returned the arc back to the store so that other people could read it, but I took a video of it when I had it that I'll pop in here of the different art, and as it kind of like goes downhill a little bit throughout the book. So like it starts out like in full color and very detailed, and then it gets to like sketches, and then it gets to like really rough sketches. And honestly, I thought that was kind of funny while I was reading it. Like at some pages I'm like, what the heck even is this? So, I mean, like, I understand why it wasn't, like, completely full and, like, finished yet. Obviously, like, they still have plenty of time before the book comes out. But at times it did make it kind of difficult to understand what was going on in the pictures because the, like, art was so rough that I'm like, I don't even know which character this is. It was decent. It was an average book. It wasn't the best graphic novel I've ever read, so I gave it 3 stars. I did still enjoy it, but, like, not very memorable. Then I read Dreamland by Sarah Dessen. This is actually a reread for me. I read this book a long time ago. I think I was like in middle school or like early high school when I read it, and I've been wanting to reread it for several years. I just never like got around to picking it up again until now. This follows the main character Caitlin, whose sister kind of like takes off and leaves the family. And so Caitlin is kind of having to like deal with her sister just being gone, and like they don't know where she is. And then Caitlin also meets this guy named Rogerson that she starts dating, and Rogerson is not the best person. He is into a lot of not so great things, including drugs and drug use. So Caitlin unfortunately like falls into that as well, and that kind of causes her to struggle a little bit while she's in college. Trigger warning for domestic violence in this, unfortunately. She gets into some not so great situations. I remember loving this book because it sort of, like, I remember it really captured the like dreamy like quality. When you're reading it, it kind of feels like you are in a dream. Like, that's what I remember loving about it so much, is it like kind of like blurs everything, like the timeline kind of blurs a little bit, and like it feels like Caitlin is sort of like dissociating a little bit and like going through the motions. And I feel like the book, I remember it captured it really well. Unfortunately, while I was rereading it, I didn't pick that up as much as when I read it when I was younger. So maybe it was just because I'm older, or it might have also been because I read it on audiobook this time. But I ended up still giving it 4 stars. I didn't love it as much as I used to, but I gave it 4 stars for like nostalgia value because it was very nostalgic for me to reread. And I reread Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is the second time I've read this book this year, and we will talk about this book again in a minute. Like I said, Fangirl is my second favorite book of all time for sure now, and you can see I'm reading it again because you can see my bookmark in here. I'm actually annotating it this time, so I've started annotating it just for myself, not for like anybody specifically, but I will lend it out if somebody wants to read my annotations. I am so in love with this book, and I've listened to the audiobook so many times. Rebecca Lohman narrates the audiobook, and she just does it so perfectly. Like, I want her to narrate my life. I love the story. I love hearing her narration. I just love everything about this book. I have read it so much recently that at one point I remember telling my friend that my brain consists entirely of Fangirl quotes and Bayside lyrics, which Bayside is a band that I've been really getting into lately. Like, that was my entire brain, just Fangirl quotes and Bayside lyrics. If you don't know, and I don't know how you wouldn't at this point because I talk about it all the time, basically it follows a girl named Kath who is a freshman at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, which is another reason why I love this book, because it's set in Lincoln, which is not far from where I live, and she's from Omaha. So I just relate to it so well because, like I said, Rainbow is from Omaha, so like I know the area really well. And Kath is an English major, and her favorite thing to do is to write fan fiction for the Simon Snow series, which is basically this world's like Harry Potter in a way. And she does have some like sort of social anxiety and some mental health things that she kind of struggles with throughout the book, and there's a lot more that goes on. I'm not going to sit here and explain it every single time because I will probably read it a couple more times this year. So, and I'm sure most of you have heard of this book, but I highly recommend it if you haven't read this book. It's amazing. I love it. And it may come as no surprise to you, but I gave it 5 stars, obviously. Then I read One True Loves by Elise Bryant. I believe this came out in January, so it's a fairly new release that I have an arc of. And it follows a main character who has kind of struggled to find her like place in high school, and she's starting to have to think about going to college, and she wants to go in undeclared, but her parents are kind of like warning her like that she needs to decide on something and go for it, because as a Black woman she is not always given the opportunities, unfortunately, that everyone else is, and so she really needs to take it and to go to college and to do what she can while she can. She also really, really loves photography, and so like she's kind of like bouncing around with that, but she kind of has the personality that if she's not like great at something, she like won't continue to do it, which she sort of like struggles with a little bit throughout the book. The majority of this book is set on like a vacation cruise. While she's there, she meets a lovely young man. I forget his name though. And so there's a little bit of like romance and tension there. I thought it was an enjoyable read. It just didn't like super stick with me a lot, so I just gave it 3 stars, just like a decent average rating. I do really love the representation in this book, and there were some really cool discussions throughout it that I really enjoyed as well. Okay, the last book I read in February was The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. So this follows a young boy as he is coming to terms with being a mixed race, gay person, and sort of as he's just like coming to find his identity, and it follows him. I can't remember how young he starts at, but it like follows him throughout most of his life until he gets to university and he finds his passion as a drag artist. So I really enjoyed this one. It was fairly short. I think the audiobook was like 4 hours long, so it wasn't super long, and I really enjoyed the representation in it and like the discussions about your identity and finding yourself and all of that. So I gave it 4 stars. Then one last thing before we move on to the March books. I did start Summer Suns by Lee Mandello, but I ended up DNFing it, which I don't usually DNF books. I have a hard time doing that. But I was listening to the audiobook and I just wasn't into it at all, unfortunately. So I just said I'm not going to read this because it's going to put me in a reading slump. So I DNF'd that. So then in March, the first book I read was These Precious Days by Ann Patchett. This is my second Ann Patchett book. I have also read Truth and Beauty, which is a memoir, and this is also a like collection of autobiographical essays. I love Ann Patchett's work, or what I've read so far. It honestly, like, it really stuck with me, and I have to write short stories for my fiction class in fiction, and all I could think of when I was trying to come up with like a short story idea was just like autobiographical things, because this was stuck in my head so much. I ended up like sort of using something that happened in my real life and like building a fiction story out of that, but yeah, that's because I read this book and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, this is a lot of autobiographical essays about Ann Patchett, and I highly recommend Ann Patchett's work. It's all so good, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Stuck With You by Ali Hazelwood. This is the second novella in the Steminism series that I was talking about earlier, and in this one the 2 love interest main characters get stuck in an elevator together, and they also kind of have like a past, so that's like coming back and you get like flashbacks in and out of that. Super good. Like I said, I love these Ali Hazelwood novellas. I also give this one 4 stars. Then I read The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, and unfortunately I did not like this book. It put me in a reading slump. It's hard to say that because like I don't know if it put me in a reading slump or if I was in a reading slump because I was just kind of like going through it. So it's hard for me to say that, but I really wanted to like it. I almost DNF'd it several times. It just like wasn't hitting the mark for me. It basically follows the like final girls from like the 80s sort of horror movie aesthetic, and like what they do with their life after they have lived through this. Each of the girls I think is supposed to represent a different 80s movie. I wasn't quite sure which of them each was. If you want to hear like actually succinct thoughts about this, you should go check out my friend Jess from Verity Books did a video where she read a bunch of Grady Hendrix books, and she always has like really succinct good thoughts about books. So yeah, go check out what she has to say about it. But I don't know, this one just wasn't for me. I don't know, I just got really bored throughout it, and it just wasn't the vibe. There was a part, however, that was very like gruesome, body horror-y, like graphic, and I really liked that part. Like that part stuck with me, and I wish that more of the book was like that, but unfortunately it wasn't. The other thing I really hated about this book was that the audiobook narrator, hated her voice. It sounded kind of like the really boring chick from the first season of American Horror Story. I'll like pop up a clip here.
He's going through with it, and there's nothing I can do to stop him. We're supposed to sign the papers next week, and that's it. 23 years gone with the stroke of a pen. I'm so upset. And I wonder if I'll ever be able to love or be loved again.
What was the reason your husband is seeking the divorce?
He says I'm very boring. I've tried to converse with him on a variety of subjects. Sports, for instance. I even learned the names of the football teams he follows. Let's see. There's the Chargers, the 49ers, the Raiders, the Seahawks up in Seattle, that's the West Coast, and the Cardinals, they're in Arizona. I memorized them for him. I'm very good at memorization. I can still name the states and all of their capitals, which I learned in the 6th grade.
And I just couldn't get past the fact that it sounded like that really boring lady, and so I was like, grr, I was like so frustrated with her boring voice. But yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of this one. 2 stars. Then I read Break Your Glass Slippers, Shine Your Icy Crown, and Unlock Your Storybook Heart by Amanda Lovelace. I read it as like an audio collection thing. So like the audio collection itself was called You Are Your Own Fairy Tale. So it's just like her collection of these 3 poetry books. I only have this one, so I'm just gonna hold this one up. But yeah, they're all poetry. Like I said, I love Amanda Lovelace. I love her poetry books. I didn't give any of them ratings, of course, because we talked about I don't rate poetry, but I do recommend all of Amanda Lovelace's books. Very, very good. And then the last book, I reread Fangirl again for the 3rd time this year, and like I said, I'm reading it again, so I have an issue. But it's okay, we're not going to talk about it. But those are all the books that I read in February and in March. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope to get back to regular scheduling soon. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
Just want